Hey, Chris.
Hi. Hi, Christina. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
It's weird seeing your face while we talk. I love
Yeah, I
it.
know. The when I met you for the first time, I saw your face on camera, of course, but then I just it's always been on the phone.
Yeah, so I'm just basking in it. Like, oh, Christina. Yeah.
This is me. No, but it's also a little bit weird to see you as well in
Yeah.
person because I'm also used to your voice, and I think that when you listen to people's voices, you start to get your own imagery of what the person looks like, especially us being the way we are, which is
hmm
very intuitive and, you know, an element of psychic mediumship, perhaps for both of us, that we start to, with all the energy that we read from each other, we start to make this other kind of picture. And then it's like, oh, there's your physical body. That was a little different.
And it's interesting, like, so vibrationally, right? And leaning into that aspect. And when I first started doing like sessions with people over Zoom, so you're like, no, it has to be in person. And then it's like, no, Zoom works. And then it's really like you're just putting up your antenna, right? And you can pull signals from anywhere and everywhere. So for me, like being able to draw visually some sort of a connection helps. But now when I think of Christina, I get like flush in the cheeks, and that's where I feel like the tingles in my upper cheekbone. It's like your own
Interesting.
little call, like
Wow. Well, you're such an energy guy. As I've said multiple times, I'm not saying I'm not an energy person, but boy, do I feel you smacking it around me all the time. It's like, poof, whoa. Whereas maybe my vibration, I don't know, or what I let in is a little bit, I guess, lower or maybe closed. I don't know.
what does this button do?
Yeah.
Oh,
You know what? I kind of felt that. You did it.
it's the craziest thing. I don't know. I'm grateful to be here, and I'm glad that we're doing this.
I am too. I am too. I think that we both operate a lot of the same way in that we both have this energetic mind and curiosity and again Chihuahua on crack.
hmm So the first time a podcast came up was a notion for me was the better part of a year ago,
Mm-hmm.
and so this moment has finally come, which is amazing and cool, and it explains why we bought the microphones and all the ring lights, and then just sat in the shed. So um, it's like at least we're kind of ready for it. And the idea that I've had, and this was it was never in my mind like a collaborative thing. It was just I was the way that I had designed this, although I hadn't done anything with it yet, was to bring on people and talk to them. So as a way, it's because I just don't have so much time. And if I want to get to understand somebody's perspective or their experience better, it's like, well, let's just do it under the guise of a podcast. And then I can save myself like hours and hours of reading because I've already got 4 books going. Like I always have like 3 or 4 books going simultaneously. And it was to take someone, like perhaps it was a musician as an example. And how does that individual then tap into that field or that awareness, and how do they explain it, or how do they put words to it, or how do they feel it or experience it? And so while we met under the umbrella of the Akashic Records, that's it's a tool, the tool belt. So like Paul McCartney is an example. I'm not the world's biggest Beatle fan, but I do appreciate what he had said about um, he just kind of taps in and the music just comes to him, right? And I know it's not exclusive to him, but it's divinely inspired is one way, or at least it's part of this field that sits out there, and then you're just able to tune in and bring things in, and it manifests that way. So without using too many woo-woo words, you get these notions or these ideas or these sentiments or these feelings, and can apply that to day-to-day life. So it's one thing to be able to have these insights, to um, be able to use these skills that we chose um, coming into this lifetime. So I just opened up a whole big can of some of the things we can talk about. But how does it apply to day-to-day life? Right. Okay, fine. Even if it's a possibility, great. How does this help me in my job, my marriage, my relationship, my partnership, friendships, relationships with myself, with others, all these things. So bringing this back around, the idea that I had for a podcast was how do we take some of the woo-woo aspects and actually just make it real for others and for ourselves.
Absolutely. And that I can't really add much to that because you said it so perfectly, and it's actually been also the same curiosity for me. I've always wondered about how people operate, and on a physical level, but also a spiritual level, let's say, and how do they tap into that? How do they hack that for their own pursuits? How do they use it for their mission? What is their mission? And then, because we're getting into beliefs here, but I believe that we're all born on a mission of some sort. So the experiences that we have, but also the spiritual downloads, let's say, help you on your journey. And I love that beauty of looking at everybody that's different than me, because everybody's different. And then somehow having that for myself and taking it home, what can I get from that myself? And then what can that add to other people that are perhaps not, it's not in their awareness at the moment, or maybe it's starting to come into their awareness, that kind of synergy, that kind of spirituality, that listening, that co-collaboration. So yeah, also, exactly my curiosity. And I just want to note that I did watch an afterlife interview with John Lennon, and he did make a point of saying that when he was here on Earth, a lot of his songwriting and his musical creation were downloaded, were channeled. He can see that now. He couldn't see it at the time, but maybe Paul McCartney does.
Maybe now. Yeah, for sure. Hey, did you see the movie Yesterday?
No.
Yeah, so we'll put a pin in that. So
okay, Yesterday, writing it down.
It's an alternate reality where the Beatles didn't exist. So this kid wakes up and he still remembers the Beatles, and remembers the lyrics to the songs for the most part, and the music. And so he was a struggling coffee shop musician, and then he just started playing Beatles songs and blew up. So it was just an interesting historical fiction, I guess, on what would it be like if that didn't exist, and then using that music and then honoring the voices that he was hearing, like internally, his conscious or conscience rather. And like, okay, this actually isn't mine, it's all of ours, and I'm just bringing this into this existence. And it was really cool. So I think you'd enjoy that.
And
then he meets John Lennon at the end. Spoiler alert.
Oh, thanks for that. Okay, I'll be looking.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting that you bring that up, because I am of the believer that there are some things that will happen regardless of the messenger / carrier of the information. So that especially is very interesting that someone already kind of thought that way and made the movie about it in this aspect.
Yeah, it's really cool. And while we're talking, the one thing I wanted to put out there is that from where I sit, I can be wrong about all of this. So just big disclaimer.
I would like to jump in and raise your disclaimer to a disclaimer from me as well, because again, the nature of the way we talk may not be in the belief systems of anyone listening in on our conversation as we speak. And I respect that and I honor that. And I apologize should I apologize? I don't know, because this is what I believe. I'm not trying to change anybody's mind. What I'm trying to do is follow my own voice and go in that direction. And then anyone who wants to listen, that's great. That's where I stand. Yeah,
and from where I sit, so I'm going to not necessarily raise the raise, but I'm going to come in and meet you on that plane where how I've gotten to where I've gotten has been from fucking up a lot, from screwing things up, from hurting people, hurting myself, not always being the best, husband or father or boyfriend or friend, employee, employer, all of those things. And it's that curiosity that I've carried, and like, well, if this doesn't work, I'm just going to blow it up, which is another topic around how self-sabotage for me, and at least recognizing that that's what I was doing, was a way of me saying, okay, I'm not on purpose. This is not what I'm supposed to be doing. This is not how I want to live my life. And so I just blow it up, which would give me an opportunity to go back and recreate something else. So I have three boys. There's Hudson, who's my stepson, like by definition, but very much mine. He's 13, and I've known him since he was like a young puppy. And then Holden and Zachary. Holden's 27 and getting married next Saturday. Zachary is 25ish soon. And when I was talking to Zachary, so I traveled a lot for work pre 2020, and these guys would meet me wherever I was. It was great. Like it's like I couldn't even believe, like, oh, I'm in town for a day, and like, who can come out? And like, we're there. And it's just, I mean, I was always so grateful for that. But we met, and he's like, he's like Holden's a lot like you, and I'm a lot like Mom. I'm like, well, tell me what you mean. He's like, well, Holden's like you. He just kind of keeps like failing up. He's like, no matter how much you fucked up, Dad, he's like, you always end up like at a better spot than how you were before. And he's like, I'm more the intellectual. And I was like, okay, like, good, you own that. I love you. But it's interesting for sure. So I'm not sure where I was going with that specifically, but
I know where you were going. You were going with, you're going about how this is kind of accumulation of a lot of trial and error / failure / learning experience.
Yes. Thank you for listening. Yeah. So that's it. And I just trying things. And what I lean into are the things that feel right. I may not be able to intellectualize them, but if it feels good, I do it. Fun is my neutral. Like if I'm not having fun, it's not worth my time or effort. And that doesn't fit every situation. And that's okay. Like I'm just not that person, but I need to be having fun to really be able to do what I do well. Just be me, or a version of this.
One thing I really like about you is that you still have a big old leg over in the corporate area, but you also have a big old leg on the other side too. And it's like you straddle it, kind of like me. You straddle the practical and, let's say, more metaphysics side, right? And you're also, and I don't want to reveal too much about what you're working on, unless you want to speak about it, but I like that, you have both feet in both areas at the moment.
Thank you. It's interesting to think about that balance, because now I don't try and hide it. And and this has been an opportunity in this, I'll just call it 2020, because I don't want to minimize or maximize anyone else's experience. But, when everything changed, was an opportunity to just be quiet and go inside and start doing that work. An example of this, when I was up in the treehouse meditating the other day, and there's some reconciliation. So sometimes like these darker spots just kind of pop up, right? And it's like, oh, then there's probably something I need to address there. And for so long, I wouldn't address them because I didn't want to inflate my own experience or overstate that. And I was focusing on helping other people under the premise that if I help enough people get what they want, then I'll get what I need, or however that saying goes. And one of them, so I wasn't always the most faithful partner in relationships, and certainly not my first marriage, and even with girlfriends prior. And so the conversation that I was having while I was meditating was around like, oh, like if I cheated on Meredith, my wife, and I apologized, like I wouldn't even be afraid of that anymore. The biggest fear that I would have would be the reconciliation inside myself.
Whoa.
And as I said that, I got more chills. It's like, and really just how, if I'm going to be or do something, to be or do that thing, and to not deny it. Right. And to give myself permission. But the letdown that I would experience in my own self will be so much greater now at this point in my life than what anyone else could put on me. And maybe that means I'm growing up, or I'm more mature, or I have a better relationship with myself.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so many spots that are worth digging into, that I buried for the better, 2 decades. And the more work that I do on myself using these other tools, whether it's energy work or the records or just whatever it might be, there's just more. And so that's when it gets better. It's like, wow, it's like I cleaned this part up, and then holy shit, there's so much more that I get to go explore. And that to me is worth honoring. So when I honor that, first and foremost, then everything else just seems to take care of itself.
Let me ask you this question.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be in the same spot if you hadn't, quote, failed so many times?
Oh God, no.
Right, exactly. So I think it adds depth and flavor to people when they mess up. And I think the result of that is a very, let's say, complicated yet very needed thing. So I'm going to take it back a little bit to me, because as I said, I like the fact that you straddle both worlds, and I'm no different, because I do kind of the same thing. I'm not in the corporate world, but I'm over 40 now, and you always think you'd have it figured out by your 40s, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And do we have it figured out, both of us? Oh no. I even look back 1 year ago and look at myself and go, wow, that was different, because it's just been so, I don't know, everyone's life could, I'm not trying to put thoughts in people's heads, but I think everybody's life kind of does that sometimes, where 1 year it's like all the difference in the world, but really it was just really fast. It was a snap. So, I remember going to university, first of all, single, not married, no kids here. I have a cat. Yeah, I'm one of those cat ladies. Just wanted to put that out there in case there was a doubt. So it's completely different than you. But when I was in uni, I didn't know, I went into uni thinking, I'm going to play this role, and I'm going to, be in international business. I'm going to major in French and minor in world business, and got it all figured out. Took a trip to Europe, came back and realized, well, shit, this is not what I want at all. What do I want? I don't know what I want. And that was kind of the first ping that I was not a person to follow that normal pathway, let's say, right? Because a lot of people go through, I always like to call it the formula, and there's nothing wrong with that. But people are wired to go through the formula. And I realized, I need a different formula, because otherwise this is not going to work for me. So I started soul searching. I found Sylvia Brown. Do you remember Sylvia Brown?
I do. I'm not sure why, but the name rings a bell.
Well, she was a psychic on Montel all the time, and she got a lot of, but she wrote a lot of books.
Yeah.
I watched her on Montel, but I bought all of her books, and a lot of the exercises in her books really still stick with me today, because it was the start of my journey, let's say, of self-discovery. So at that time I was like, I'm not a psychic medium. Now 20 years later, things have changed, but at that time it was just like, who am I and why am I so interested in this? And I just went with it. Right. I ended up changing my major about 20 different times. I finally got out after 7 years. And I think it was either my mom or my father who said, usually if you're in school for 7 years, you come out a doctor. What are you not telling us? And I'm like, well, sorry to disappoint you. I just have one major, no minor. Believe me, we're all lucky I'm getting out. And it wasn't because I wasn't smart, and it wasn't because I was a hard worker. It was just, I just had this turmoil inside of me. My last year of university, I got really scared of getting a job. Again, not because it didn't want to work. I was a very hard worker. It was because, oh my gosh, I don't want to get stuck. So my whole life, I've made decisions not to get, quote, stuck, because I'm not a flighty person, but I like the freedom to choose. And I think that I evolved so much, I can't be stuck. I have to, it has to roll like water, right? And the tide moves and it goes into different channels, and that's kind of my whole life. I ended up applying for 3 different positions. The first one was I applied to work on a cruise ship, which is very competitive, and I don't have many skills for that. I mean, at that time I didn't, so I was like, any job you want to give me, that's fine. I applied for that. I applied to work on a base camp in Antarctica because I thought that might be a good jumping off point. Apply for that. But, here's what's going on down there. It's a bunch of scientists doing a lot of studies, and you can't just go down there, pitch a tent, and study stuff. You got to actually have a city that keeps you alive, because it's just so hard. The environment is just so rough. It's not hospitable to humans at all. And so they need firefighters, doctors, chefs, those kinds of people, construction workers to keep the system going, engineers. I'm none of those. So I read that the best way to get your foot in the door was to say that you would be like a janitor. So I'm like, I can be a janitor. And especially, I'm like, apply, but there were no positions for that. So then I decided to apply to be like equipment, like crane operator. I applied to be a forklift operator and a crane operator, right? Got none of those because I didn't have any experience. I get it. But so, that didn't work out for me. And then I was following this guy's blog, and he was an American in South Korea teaching English. And the way he presented it in his blog was that it was a very bizarre experience because it's a different culture, right? And I was just hooked. So I applied to work in South Korea, not without researching which country was the biggest bang for my buck, right? Because I don't want to go to a country and not make any money, right? But at that time, it was South Korea. So I applied for those 3 positions. I said, I can't even choose between the 3. Whatever hits first, I'll do it. Korea hit first. So I went to Korea. They give me a book and a marker, throw me in a classroom, and say, here, teach. I had no experience. And it's a bunch of 4 and 5-year-olds that don't speak a lick of English. And I'm supposed to teach them and corral them. And so I'm like, hi, everybody, and it was a wild first day, that's for sure. It felt like 12 years, believe me. So went from that to getting an award from the government that I was the best English teacher in Korea. So it was all just, I never had a class on teaching ever. I did my own research, believe me, and trial and error. But, the best way I learn is through experience, just like you. And also kind of what's needed, One thing I discovered in Korea that is a crucial component to why I am now a coach is that in the education system and in the culture, these elementary school kids that would come to this, quote, cram school that I worked, which is an after school, it's like a school after the school, It's a place where it's babysitter / education as a business. And kids go to school in the morning, and then they go to all these different cram schools. They go to the swim school, the taekwondo school, the English school, the math school, and then they get home and they eat a late dinner. They do homework until they get tired, which is, midnight, 1 o'clock. I couldn't believe how late kids went to sleep, and then wake up and do it all again next day. And I realized that just by looking at a lot of my students that this was not working for most of the students. I mean, there were a couple that were okay. And I could sense that they all had, some of them were very, very brilliant, but they were the worst students because they gave up. And then some of the students were just trying and trying and trying and trying. And they were just so overwhelmed that the results were not, let's say, test results. I want to say test results were not in their favor. And I remember marking a test for students at like 92% or 95%, and they would come to me crying when they get it. And I'm like, why are you crying? They're like, because if I don't make a 100, it's not good enough. My mom makes me go outside, like she kicks me out of the house or some other thing. So I realized, you know what? I want to create this atmosphere. You know, their days are long, and if I can provide them the maximum fun where they can just breathe, then maybe they can just look forward to my class when they have to go to my class. And you wouldn't believe the results just by taking a moment, restructuring my entire class for all kinds of different learners. You know, you wouldn't believe the results that happen in these kids. But then taking it a step further, there was kind of a hidden coaching element of it, because you know, the kids that didn't have any confidence, which is basically a B student in Korea, you know, I would identify one good thing that they're good at, one talent or one thing that makes them very special versus everybody else in the class. And, you know, I saw grades change and I saw lives change just from recognizing the human aspect of a person, you know, and acknowledging who they are. I want to say soul level. I wouldn't call it that at the time, but now I realize that. And so I realized that also I had a natural ability to kind of see people in a bit of a different way than perhaps other people see. So, and that's actually the short condensed version, but I'm talking a lot. So we're going to move on. I ended up 12 years in Korea. I got deported, not my fault. Yeah. I never told you.
How did you get deported?
I got deported from South Korea.
Of course.
Yeah. They impeached President Park, the woman president that they had. And they brought in President Moon, who is actually right now in 2020, it's their current president. And long story short, it was very political, but his big agenda was that there should be equal education for everyone, right? And because people were spending so much money on education, and it was actually affecting the birth rate, because people only want to have one kid because they can't afford two to educate. And that's the way you get ahead in Korea, right? I worked at the time at an offshore Canadian school. And this Canadian school was an international school. However, in the zoning of it, the owner didn't zone it as an international school because there are a lot of rules to follow to satisfy that classification. He registered it as a language school. And there's the problem. So the Minister of Education of Seoul got mad at one of the Canadian schools, like one of our sister schools. And then he was like, you know what? I really want to hurt this school. I'm going to sue immigration for giving these teachers the wrong visa, because they're not teaching language. They're teaching math. They're teaching social studies. They're teaching history. And so that's how it started. And then me and at my school, was it 8 of us got deported alone? The hundreds did. So it wasn't just me, but we got detained. So quote, arrested. We got brought into a cage of a bus that they bring violators in. We got brought to immigration. They said, okay, you got 2 choices. So right now you're on 48-hour detention. And after 48 hours, we're going to put you on a plane somewhere in your country, which we're Americans, so that could be anywhere. Chicago, San Diego, Los Angeles, whatever, you know, whatever. Or if you give us some dirt about your school, we will let you have 30 days and we will not put the deported stamp on your passport, and you're banned for 1 year and you can come back. And at the time I had 2 cats and it takes 30 days to prepare them to leave. And I thought that was a pretty good deal. So I took the 30 days. Otherwise, if I were just alone, I probably would have stayed and fought just for the sake of it. But anyway, a little inconvenient, right? 12 years. And then, you know, they're like, get out. Yeah.
So it's interesting that you had an immigrant experience.
Yeah.
And how has that so that was just backing up a little bit. So that was like your first series of pings, right? Where you start to get the
Mm-hmm.
sense of how you can operate and work with people
Mm-hmm.
and bring the best of them forth, right? And help them uncover that.
Yeah.
But so how has your experience as a deported immigrant impacted your work, particularly in the current political environment in the States?
Well, it definitely not only puts a perspective on the current immigrant situation in the United States, like the way I know they feel, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
was treated with more dignity and respect than they were. I'm quite sure of it.
Yeah.
But it also makes me look different at people about how when bad things happen to people, people are very fast to label a victim and the aggressor.
Mm-hmm.
And I try not to do that anymore, because I'm like, it's complicated. And there's a human aspect to all of the roles that people play in different areas of law or, life or anything like that. So I'm not so quick to judge anyone based on their decisions or based on the repercussions and the consequences of their choices. It helps me be a more compassionate person.
That's a great story. And I'm thinking about, and so we'll call you 40 years old. So
Yay.
do you feel closer? Well, the overarching, like your true self, your true nature,
Mm-hmm.
and let's assume that you feel closer to your true nature today than you have before. But
Oh, yeah.
if we're to go back in time 10 years relative to going back to when you were a girl, right? And you're just discovering and you're spending time playing with the things that have captivate you and however you spent your time growing up. Do you feel closer to that version of yourself relative to the, let's say, 30-year-old version of yourself?
So the question is between little girl Christina or 30-year-old Christina?
Yeah.
Hmm. That's a very good question there, Chris. I'm going to ask you the same thing in just a minute because that's really interesting. you know, I think there is a lot of wisdom within all the experiences that I've had. So I do feel closer to that 30 years old. And when I think back to my existence as a little girl, to quote my mother, you just quite kind of showed up for your childhood. You had no personality. So I'd say I'm better off at 30 years old.
Not the answer I was expecting. That's great.
I
I
know.
love that. You just
Well,
kind of showed up.
yeah, she's like, you clocked in, you clocked out, and it was my sister who's I was the oldest, who's younger. She was the one that got all the attention. I was fine because I was more of the observer, right? I still kind of am in a lot of ways, but
Yeah.
So I'm a coach now because Korea definitely affected me. I'm writing a book about it as we speak.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's more to the story spiritually that happened after I got deported. Deported happened in 2017 and then it's now 2020. But I think that's for another time. So I want to know, how did you get into coaching? What led you to where, as far as, I know you already spoke about all of your experiences that have kind of combined to make you the person you are today, but how did you stumble into helping others?
Much like I'd stumble into just about anything.
Oh,
Um,
pray
that's
tell.
just I roll with it, right?
Yeah.
So even the word coach, as it relates to one of the ways I operate in this world, feels kind of like, really,
Yeah.
you know, and putting a label on anything I do historically or being categorized in any one way makes me want to get rid of that as quickly as possible.
Ooh. Well, then I retract the fact that I used the C word.
No. But I'm not reconciled to it because it still makes it seem as if like, okay, fine. But it did prompt some inner dialogue over the past couple of weeks And I remembered a couple of very specific instances. So I grew up in the middle of Michigan in a neighborhood where there weren't a lot of kids my age. And my father he worked third shift. He was a baker. It's a family bakery back in Michigan. So he wasn't just around an awful lot. And I'm not complaining. When he was around, he was very present and we did a lot of things together. But during the day, he was sleeping, and during the night, he was awake. And then my mother was just hustling, just trying to put food on the table. And we grew up definitely either upper, lower class or low, middle class at best, right? Like government cheese and the whole thing. And you wouldn't have known it because I was happy and I had anything and everything available to me. So I'd spend time with my baseball cards, building forts. And what I used to love to do, so this is of course pre-computers because I'm 47, was look at the backs of baseball cards and look at the stats and advanced analytics. So I love being able to quickly figure out a pitcher's earned run average, or how many walks would they be issued per inning. So I like playing with data, and I would make games out of this data. So I'd make my own board games, or I used to love to draw and paint and all these things. It was always a very creative, and would find my own way to keep myself entertained. So I'd go out. We had some woods that were on the other side of our neighborhood. So we'd go down there, and I found a creek, and I'd just sit by the creek and just wait for that fish to come by, and it never came. It was like a super shallow creek, right? But I made my own fun. And one of the ways that I would do that is if something didn't exist, I didn't know enough to not go create it, right? It's like, oh, I want to go learn how to play volleyball because I found this beach volleyball court behind this gym somewhere in Michigan, which was weird. Like, and not even like on the beach in Michigan. It's like in the middle of like right here, right? You know, I'm a Michigander now.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, so
wow.
I grabbed a couple of the neighbor kids and I went down there and we cleaned it up. And then we had this little beach volleyball league. And then the owners of the gym found out that we were doing it because all of a sudden their volleyball court was clean and kept up. And like, well, we can't have you doing that for liability reasons. Like, okay, fine. Screw it.
Oh, spoil the fun.
So I was like, why don't we just go make a volleyball league? And it didn't exist for boys or men, young men in Michigan at the time. Or so I thought. So we went and created a volleyball league, and then I found in this weird pocket of it was like the senior league, so they were like Olympians, but in the senior Olympics, and really good volleyball players. And I found these guys, like, fine, we'll coach you, but don't waste our time. Like, you have to show up. Ooh. and we got really good really quick, so I was able to pull in people. I created an intramural basketball league. All these things are just, it's like, okay, fine. If I'm not good enough to go do this in my high school or whatever, let's go create it. And so I just didn't know that I couldn't go make things happen. It was just not part of my vocabulary. And then thinking about coaching specifically, to answer that question, my brother had a basketball team. My brother and I were very close growing up because my mom was working, my dad was gone. And it's like, okay, Chris, you're going to go do something, just take Andy with you. So he just hung out with my friends. And his friends were really cool. This is like 4th grade Catholic school. And like, hey, would you be our coach? I was like, oh yeah, sure, I can do that. And I grabbed my friend Dan and asked if he wanted to be the assistant. Right, so we had a couple of guys keep an eye on these kids, and it's so much fun. I mean, Andy and his group were just a good group of kids to be around. And I wish I could remember this one individual's name, but I can see him. He wore thick glasses, had red hair, shorts were too big, clearly and ostensibly like not an athlete. Nice kid. And he walked into this group of kids that all knew each other, right? So his parents like made him go play basketball. And I related to that. I understood kind of what he was going through at some level. And he got fair treatment, equal treatment. I mean, he wasn't like made to feel special or unique, like, oh, come on, you can do this. Like, hey, come on, I'm going to treat you like I treat everybody else, and let's just make this happen. And I coached him that way. So we get towards the end of the season, he wouldn't even take a shot. I mean, he was always, he'd get the ball and would kind of freeze and would look to pass it, so somebody go get it from him. So he got equal playing time as everyone else. And we get to the end of the season, and I don't know if it was the last game or close. So it didn't feel like a championship game, but my memory's shot, and we'll talk about that some other episode. But he ended up with the ball and was fouled as he was taking a shot from somewhere around the free throw line. So like maybe 10 feet out. And like, okay, so he goes to the free throw line and they give him the ball. And like he's never made a free throw shot in his life, as far as I know. And we're all just like waiting, and he just kind of boom throws us all into it, and it went in. And to see the look on his face, I'm not even sure how old you are in fourth grade, but let's just say he's like 10 or 11, and just the look on his face of accomplishment. And the team, my brother's friends, were all just like really supportive, and everyone was like, yeah, way to go. And then I looked at his dad, and his dad was almost crying, and I was like, oh, like, okay, like we did this, right? We allowed for this to happen, and that to me was worth everything. Another another situation I found myself in.
By the way, I'm almost in tears too. Like I'm like, no, I can't do this. I can't do it. Go ahead, switch to the next story, quick.
And in this case, I do remember who it was. Her name was Katie Hagemeyer. She was playing right field on my sister's intramural softball team. And the pitcher, her name was Jenny. Jenny and Katie and Kelly were all friends. And Jenny is very much an athlete, really good softball player. And it felt like a championship game. Like that's how I kind of remember this. And traditionally, you put your weakest fielder out in right field because the chances of anyone hitting the ball out there are slim to none.
I remember being in that position once. Yep.
Right. That's where we would go.
Yep.
And couldn't catch the ball. Probably didn't really care to be there. I was just doing it to hang out with their friends. Right. So as I'm saying this, it reminds me a lot of like Meredith, like just like the social aspect of her. And I remember there being runners on base, and we were up but maybe by one run. It was the bottom of like the seventh inning, I think. And one of their better hitters comes up, and I thought, well, hopefully Jenny strikes it out, because I knew that Jenny had the ability to strike someone out. And somehow this person got their bat on the ball, but late, the ball goes out to right field. It was like the longest.
Of course it was, right? Why are you telling the story if it didn't go there?
Yeah, it's like so movie-esque. And continuing the same vein of the movie, she didn't move, right? She stuck her glove up. And like the ball just magically went in there.
Wow.
And the look of accomplishment on her face, and watching my sister and her friends being able to celebrate that, just felt so good. I was so excited. So those were the earliest inclinations that I had of coaching, and how much I loved to help bring out the best of people, because it made me feel good, right? Like fun is my neutral.
Yep.
And so then, of course, through lots of other things, I find myself married with a child at the age of 20. And so what do? Like, I'm a good Catholic boy and ish. And, you get married, find a job, do everything. And I was working 70 hours a week. I was making good money running a restaurant, or running restaurants for Boston Chicken at the time. And I was, 19, 20 years old, and I had like $1 million P&L. It was crazy. Like, I can't believe people even trusted me with that. But I'm really good at talking my way into stuff. Yes.
Oh, I can tell. No, really?
Yeah. And then I found myself like managing people that were older than me, which was another interesting thing. So here I am, 19 or 20, and the only thing I knew how to do well consistently was to outwork everyone. Like, I knew that I could at least be the hardest worker. And what I learned through that experience over those next couple of years was that leadership is not doing all the work so these other people can stand around, right? And that was another lesson in how to manage people and how to build respect and trust with people that were older, and to not do this to be liked, right? Because I'm sure people were taking like bags of food and stealing it. Like, my food cost was like, people just take advantage of those things. Mm-hmm. But I was just as culpable, because I'm also so close to them in age that like, it was like, oh, why can't we be friends and hang out? Which some of them we did, and we're still really good friends. But that was another lesson in how not to lead all the time, but then just like trial and error, and just, failing my way up, as we talked about in the front end of this. And eventually in my, I guess probably like mid to late 30s, and I just wasn't getting traction, and I was not happy. I was drinking like a fish, series of horrible relationships, even with my kids at that point. And it's like, okay, like this experiment's gone on way too long, and I need to if I don't fix it now, it's not going to get fixed. I'm going to end up living somewhere out in Joliet, Illinois, and in a shitty little apartment and just being miserable, right? And that's one version of reality, and I chose differently. So as much like if you remember the Seinfeld episode where George just does the opposite of what he would generally do, and then all of a sudden everything took off.
Yes.
That's what I applied, and it's like, okay, let's stop drinking, like change your relationship with alcohol, and change your relationship with myself and others. It's like don't date, don't masturbate, just like right, just clean your shit up.
Wow.
And
Wow.
then I'm, living in Santa Monica with a yoga teacher as a wife. It's just like getting out of your own way. And Mary's great. But where it landed then was really focusing on that part of the cleanup effort, Christina, was I can't go back and calculate the backs of baseball cards now. I can't paint and make the type of living that I want. I can't draw and have that kind of living. And being creative, like how's it going to show up? And working for nonprofits, like I can't support my kids and going through soon to be college if I'm working at an NPO. Like there has to be something that I'm missing here. So I came back to the verbs. It's like, okay, so if I can't be a data analyst because I got to college and I was like, nope, I need experiences, and just said, this is it, it's gone. I think I went to 4 or 5 classes, and the ones that I went to were acting classes, which was fun. And then I had a radio show.
That makes sense.
Which was even more fun, right? It's like, I'm going to work on
that
these
really makes sense.
So, but it was fun. And I love music. For me is cathartic. I love it. But I started focusing on the verbs, like, so creating, data analytics. My grandfather used to say all the time, or my grandmother on my maternal side, like, you could sell snow to an Eskimo. And I never took that as a compliment. Like sales always felt dirty to me. Like, oh, like I'm going to convince you to go buy this lemon car. And there's just something very malicious about it. But when I was able to pivot that to really helping people, and if there's something or a product or someone that I believe in, that it feels good, then I can do that. So what I landed on was data, creating, selling, coaching, and leading. And it's like, okay, so what can I go talk myself into from a career perspective that's going to give me that? And ended up running sales teams for Series A startups in the Bay Area. And largely because, some people lead from the front, some people lead from behind. And for me, Christina, I just like being in the middle and being shoulder to shoulder with everyone, and helping them align the mission with their purpose. Okay, that's interesting. So that they feel like they have an opportunity to transcend what was previously available to them. So, long answer to a short question, and that for me is really fun right now. So yeah. I'm cool with the idea of coaching, and I think where it fits well is, and I don't want to say with men, I want to say with people that have masculine energy, which can still apply to folks who identify as women, but
or
have this,
etc.
Yes, and LGBTQ plus, like whatever, the people that identify with the more feminine aspects of their nature, are really interesting to me. And people that it's like, okay, I've tried everything and I'm fucking miserable, or I'm doing all the right things and this still sucks. Like I'm 40 years old, I've mortgaged out my life, or whatever that might be. That's one aspect of people that I'm able to serve. But another aspect, which is really fun, is with some of these folks that are in the same space from a technology or software perspective, that want to explore and become better versions of themselves so they can help support the people that they're responsible to and responsible for. And that's fun. So being able to do that with people and really focus on the journey and not any specific outcomes, other than there's more and more, and we clean up one area and more is revealed, is where things really become fun. That's a space I like to play in.
Yeah. That's when you bring up the word outcomes, that's I like results / outcomes as well. But one thing that coaching, I'll say it for myself, has taught me is that sometimes the outcomes the desired results that you want are not really what you want at all. So, you know, the journey to extract the vein, you know, to really tap into that vein that you really need to see a bigger picture, or even the smaller pictures within the bigger one, is a very daunting but interesting kind of way to be, in my experience. So yeah, because people are always evolving, right?
Hopefully,
I hope.
whether they're aware of it or not. That's for sure.
Wasn't there like a saying that's like, if you're not moving, you're dead, or something?
Well, sounds like my mother, and she's very much like a shark. Like, you know, like the shark is always moving, right? Yeah, no, something just came in. I don't know if it was something or someone. Things just happen under the treehouse. But yeah, it's like you keep evolving, like get busy living or get busy dying, kind of the same thing, right?
Exactly. So yeah. Well, when I said the word coach to you, you were like, I know perhaps labels are not your big thing, right? But would you call yourself maybe an intuitive strategist?
Oh.
Which there's a reason I bring that up, because it's my own, because, you know, we've worked together, right? Mm-hmm. And it came to mind the other day in regards to you. So I just want to throw that out.
That makes sense. And so even when we say intuitive, that intuitive is probably like the gateway drug into what's really going on, right? So can I call myself that? Yeah.
Yeah, but you know, that is the same kind of demon that I face. It's like, you know, what kind of coach am I? You know, just coach, but there's an intuitive aspect to it, but there's just so much more. So it's really, really hard to put any kind of word with it, because I'm not convinced that there's any word for it at all.
The question came up the other day, like, how do you know this stuff? Like, how do you know? I'm like, I have no idea. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I just do.
Yep.
I just do. Right. So.
Very, very much so.
It's interesting. What's one thing that you can recommend that someone takes into their week?
One thing I think that people can take from this, from this point, if you're listening at this very moment, it's just like we took it back, right? We looked at ourselves and, you know, at different parts of our life, on what passions we had, what kind of natural abilities per se we had that we listened to, and through experience have kind of finally crafted a little bit more, so that we can, you know, use our gifts to help others, right? To do what we want to do. So my question, or the takeaway to everybody, is what kinds of things happened in your life that make you who you are today? And looking at who you are today, do you feel as if you're really listening to yourself, or do you know, check in with yourself?
I had a similar thought.
Okay.
Which is why I started smiling and thinking about my own experience over this week. And for so long, I refused to search inside of myself. Right. And I just, like, it's dark, it's scary. There's a lot of shit going on there that I'm just not ready to deal with. So I would take that energy and apply it externally. I think we addressed this a little bit earlier. Mm-hmm. And now my experience has been that when I go in and I clean something up, or I'm working on something, that it creates space for what's next. And for so long, and I'm not judging the journey, but for so long in not doing that, I racked up a lot of experiences, which I've learned from, and to not have judgment toward myself about that, where I should feel bad about anything that I've done. I've hurt tons of people. That's just the nature of it, and the nature of my existence. And I'm okay with all of it, because I'm also, then when I say that I've hurt a lot of people, I'm also perhaps overstating the level of importance that I had in their life, right? So that could
Possible,
be
but
some
yeah.
form of malignant narcissism, or at least being aware of that. And that when you factor in other people's experience, other people's journey, and having met these individuals, that there is an exchange there. And sometimes it feels really good, and sometimes it doesn't feel good. But it's always about lessons and evolution. So the removing judgment about these experiences that I've had toward myself, because I grew up a good Catholic, and it's just part of that, ancestral DNA, is in being okay with it all. And so there's the moment where it's like, well, of course this person reacted that way, or of course you did this, because that's what was available to you at that time, right?
Right.
And it's like, oh yeah, okay. So I made the best decision I could at that time, and that's been really good for me. And not to forgive myself, because even forgiving feels like a hierarchical relationship. And what it's like, okay, I understand, and I'm cool with it. So just being able to say I understand, and then thinking about the lessons learned and how that little trail has led me to where I am now, I wouldn't trade it for anything. And I guess the one thing would be, if there's an area of your life that you feel shameful about, it's to just ask yourself why, and to think about results that have come out of that, positive or negative. I don't believe in good or bad, period, but I do believe in positive and negative. And that's the work I'm going to continue doing.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I want to build on that actually, and just take it another step forward, which is, don't judge yourself. Don't be so hard on yourself. And, just what I said, be more introspective about, where you've been up into this point. But I also want to challenge everybody, is there something kind of an unspoken desire deep down, or a little voice in you that has always said, what about this? What is that? What is that little squeak that you're hearing? And, it's going to be different for a lot of people, so I can't really put words in your mouth for that. But, what is that? Can you at least acknowledge that you're hearing it?
And hearing, to be clear, yes, hearing, to be clear, can be hearing in a non-audio way, right? So hearing, when you're listening, you can listen energetically, you can listen with your core, you can listen to your gut instinct, right? There are many ways to hear other than the most obvious definition. So be open to all of it.
Yep, exactly.
Or not.
Or not.
Right.
But I will say, if you do start to kind of explore that aspect of yourself, then I will say from experience, it might be a little uncomfortable to change into that direction, but it leads to a direction of living a little bit more authentically, and that could be a little bit more appetizing than another way that you've been. So
yeah, absolutely.
Well,
so
Chris,
on our next episode, we're going to talk about Lemurian starseed activation, fact or fiction. I'm just making that up.
Oh, because I'm like, okay, sounds good. Just give me a link and I'm ready.
Cool. Thanks for pulling this together, Christina.
Well, thank you as well. And it's an honor and a privilege. And I'm also going to do my own introspective now. I feel very, very inside myself. So thank you.
Feel good. Thank you. I'll see you next week.
Yeah, see you then. Bye-bye.